Hello, I'm Cora Yoder, and I am back again to talk a little bit more about hand quilting. In my last video, you saw where I was talking about hand quilting supplies. Well, you've gotten your supplies all together, and we are ready to start our first project. So for this video, I am going to be sharing how to piece a simple pillow top. Just something simple so that the focus can really be on the hand quilting. We'll be piecing this top. I used a mini charm of Sugarcreek fabric and then just a little 8.5-inch square for the center. You might even already have the supplies that you need to make this pillow on hand. So stick around and I will show you how to hand quilt and make this pillow. So we are going to talk about the supplies that you're going to need to make this hand quilted pillow. I used a mini charm of Sugarcreek fabric, one of my collections with Moda, for my pillow. I used one mini charm. I just chose my favorite prints out of the pack. You won't need to use all of them, so you can pick and choose your favorites. You are going to need an 8.5-inch square of fabric for the center. Again, this fabric for the center was from my Sugarcreek collection as well. You can choose your favorite fabric that you want to highlight in the center. If you want your stitches to show up nicely, you might want to choose a lighter fabric or one without a lot of colors going on, just so that that hand quilting really shows up for you. Additionally, for your fabric supplies, you're going to need binding fabric. I love using a striped binding, so I have chosen one of the stripes from Sugarcreek. I used 1/8 yard, just 2 strips cut at 2 inches was all that I needed. I really like using a 2-inch binding, especially on smaller projects. I find that it works really well. And I'm actually going to be showing you my favorite way to bind later in the tutorial, so you'll want to keep an eye out for that. You will need the back of your pillow top sandwich. So this isn't the backing of your pillow, it's just the back of your pillow top sandwich. You can use a lightweight muslin. What I've used here is a Moda Bella Solid. It's 9900-200 is the name of the fabric color. And I have cut my square at 14.5 inches. There's no hard fast rule about how big you need that square to be. You just want it to be bigger by about 2 inches or so than your quilted pillow top. And it doesn't even have to be tidy. Like, you can just go to town with your rotary cutter and just cut something a little bit bigger than your pillow top. Same with your batting. I have a 14.5-inch piece of batting, but really you just need something that's roughly 2 inches bigger than your completed pillow top. For my backing, you will need, now this is the backing part of your pillow. So I'm talking this part back here. It gets a little bit confusing sometimes because you have a pillow top back that's inside of the pillow where you can see the back of your hand quilting, and then you have the actual back of your pillow. So for the back of your pillow, you're going to need 1/2 yard of fabric. And I chose this cute little blueprint also from Sugarcreek. So in addition to your fabric supplies, we need hand quilting supplies. Now, I talked about my hand quilting supplies in a previous video, so if you have any questions about anything that I am mentioning here, make sure you go back and check that out. But I will let you know what I'm using for this. The threads are always the most fun thing to pick out for a project, and I am using threads from my Sunny Stitches thread pack with aurifil. These are the 12-weight threads that I mentioned earlier in a variety of colors. I love using lots of different colors for projects like this, so I'm using all of the colors. You will need your needles that you've chosen for hand quilting. Cute little scissors is always a bonus, and something to mark your pillow top with. And then if you have a favorite spray based, I use the 505 spray based, you'll want to have that on hand too to make your pillow top. The first step that we're going to do when we're making our pillow is we need to piece our pillow top. So I have my 8.5-inch square of the center part of my pillow here, and I am using the Sugarcreek mini charm for the outer border. And you just need 4 squares across the top, 4 squares across the bottom, and then you're going to need 6 squares on the left and right sides. So I just really chose my favorite squares. I wanted something colorful, so I ended up just kind of choosing some of the prints with less of the white in them, and just now's the time. You don't always like all of the mini charm squares that you get in a pack, so just choose your favorites and you'll be good to go. Once you have all of your squares laid out, you're going to piece your top 4 together, your bottom 4 together, sew them to the top and bottom. But here you can press away from the center or towards the center. Our hand quilting stitches are not going to be necessarily running right with our seam allowance, so you can press that whichever way you prefer. And then you're going to add the 6 on either side. Once you have that completed, you're going to have a delightful little quilt top. I have one that I have finished up here, and it's going to look something like this. And once we get to this point, we're actually ready to mark our quilt top. Now, before I mark, if I have any questions about what thread color do I want to use, sometimes it's kind of hard to know what the thread is actually going to look like on the project. So sometimes I will, pull some of the threads I think I might like to use. Like I think this is a really pretty coral, but what's it going to look like on the top? So you can pull it out and just lay it across your top and get a really good idea of how it's going to look. I've found that colors that look, they're going to look lighter on your quilt top than they're going to look on the spool. So this yellow, for example, he's going to end up looking quite a bit lighter when it's placed on there. And then imagine you're going to have spacing in between, so that yellow is going to become a little bit lighter than what you're seeing here. But this is a great way to audition your threads so that you can see, oh, I really like the way that dark gray pops on there. I don't care for that light yellow. You can make those decisions before you ever actually start hand quilting. So if I have any question about what colors I want to use, this is something that I'll do and something I encourage people to do, just to try out your different thread colors so that you end up with something that you're going to be happy with. And maybe you want something with less contrast. There are beautiful quilt tops that are quilted using off-white thread or a white thread where it blends in much more. Maybe that's the look that you want to go for. So you can lay that out and decide if that's what you want. Once you've decided on your thread colors, the reason I have you do that ahead of time is because once we mark with this blue mark, it's going to become a little bit more difficult to see exactly what the threads look like. So decide your threads and then we're ready to mark. And I do like to mark the quilt top before I make my sandwich. So that's what we're going to do. You will use a ruler that is pretty long so that you can run it across your project. I usually just choose my longest ruler when I'm marking bigger projects. For pillows, something small is great, but it's very nice if you can do a whole continuous line across your quilt top. Now for this fabric, because it has the little dots spread out, when I was making my pillow, as you can see here, I wanted to kind of make my stitching lines go along with the motif on the fabric. So that's how I chose to mark this one. And I tried out different quilting before I settled on this one. I laid out my threads vertically and horizontally to see if I liked that better, but in the end I liked it running diagonally better. So that's how we're gonna mark our quilt top here, diagonally. And I did not worry about how my threads ran in the square corners. Sometimes I will make sure that everything lines up nice and tidy through those points, but for this, because I wanted the focus to be on the center, I didn't worry about how they landed out here in the border. So I just kind of chose dots that ran, and as you can see when I'm laying my ruler out here, they don't exactly, like, it's not running the same on this side as it is over here, and that's okay. It doesn't need to for this one. Sometimes you do want things running nicely, and sometimes this is going to be okay. As you can see on this pillow here, you don't even notice that they're not running exactly right through the squares in the border. And that is, something you can audition to, how your stitching lines are going to line up when you're auditioning your thread choices. So I will probably actually move this. I don't like having to hand quilt through this bulk over here in this corner, so I'm going to back off just a little bit here and see if I can avoid having to hand quilt through where those seams line up there. So I'm probably going to start right here, just lining up with the gray polka dots. This is the Mark Be Gone marker, and this is what I do most of my marking with. Actually all of my marking, not even most of it. I hardly ever use anything else. So we're just going to mark here, and you're just going to go down through. I find that this marker shows up pretty well even on the dark fabrics, so I use it for light fabrics and dark fabrics. One other thing that I want to mention too is when you are beginning to decide how you want to quilt your project, it's better to do less marking and less hand quilting, and you can always go back in and add more. If you start in the center with super dense hand quilting, then you are kind of locked into continuing the dense quilting as you go out. So, if I were to come in here and mark these 1/2 inch marks, that's going to be a lot of quilting on this small project. So you might decide, hey, I want to come out and mark out here so my quilting's not quite as dense. One thing that I would suggest that you do with whatever batting you're choosing is they always say how far apart you can hand quilt and machine quilt. So if you look at your batting, a lot of battings are like 8 to 12 inches. You can hand quilt or machine quilt. Keep that in mind when you're choosing how far you're going to mark your lines. For mine, I skipped a row of dots. So I'm going to mark here, and you would just come down through and mark all of your lines. I tend to go all in one direction first, all the way down towards one side, and then I'll go back up and mark the other side, and then I'll pivot and do the same thing the other way. So you just cruise on down through here. And this is just going to help keep your hand quilting tidy once you start actually doing the hand quilting. You can do these corners as you'd like. Typically what I do is I mark as far as I can, and then these lines are roughly an inch apart. You can see they're about an inch apart. So then I just used my last line and measured about an inch. It was a little bit more generous than an inch, and then marked the rest of my corners. So this is what I would do, and then once I have this side done, I would go all the way out, then I would come up and mark the next side, then I would pivot around and mark going the other direction. So I would come back here, kind of stay away from those intersections. You can quilt through those if you need to, but they are gonna be a little bit, you're gonna have to work a little bit harder to get through those. So it's nice if you can avoid those. So then I would just come down through here and mark going this direction here. And once you have everything marked, then you're ready to make your pillow top sandwich. We are now going to be talking about the actual hand quilting on our pillow project. We've talked about how to piece, how to mark our tops, and so now we are ready to hand quilt. I have my needle already threaded here. I use the size 7 embroidery needle, which is probably about the smallest eye that you're going to want to use for hand quilting. It can be a little bit fussy to thread. I don't use a needle threader, but if that's something that you want to do, you just go for it. So I have my needle already threaded. The first thing that we're going to do is make what's called a quilter's knot. Now you don't have to make this sort of knot. I know when I very first started hand quilting, I did like this sort of jazz, you know, where you're like making your little knot like this, and that's just fine. There's no rules on how to make a knot. My grandma and her daughters, which would be my mom and my aunts, they make a knot that they call a booger knot, where they do some kind of this sort of action and it just turns into a knot. I was never able to do that, so that's not the kind of knot that I make, but if that's you, you just go for it. The kind of knot that I like to do is called a quilter's knot. And we'll see if I can get it right. Sometimes when I do this, it slides off the end, but it usually stays put. So I'm right-handed. I have the needle in my right hand, pointed at my left hand. You put your thread right on top of your needle. You're gonna wrap away from yourself, maybe 2 or 3 times. Grab that, and then just slide it down your thread. And if I did it right, I'm gonna have a knot right there at the bottom. You see that little fella? That's what you're after. So I put my little knot in, and then we're ready to start hand quilting. Now when I hand quilt, I tend to work, I do a couple lines in the center, going both directions, and sort of work my way out, kind of like to baste everything in place. So let's back up just a second and talk about spray basting, because that's important, and you're gonna wanna have your pillow top spray basted. I use 505, it's my spray baste of choice, and what I will do is I tend just to flip my project in half. I will spray the fabric portion of my project, flip that over, flip over the other side, spray, flip that down, and then I'll repeat and do the same thing again right up here for the top. I like to spray my fabric side rather than the batting side. That's just a personal preference. You can do whichever way you like. So spray, smooth down, and then do the other side. And then the last thing that I like to do is I like to flip the whole thing over and then give this just a nice solid press from the back, just to make sure I don't have any wrinkles. Now, if you do find that you have any kind of crazy wrinkliness going on here, you can take this over to your iron and just give it an iron and just really smooth everything out. I will even do that with my marked lines. That's kind of up to you if that's something that you feel comfortable with or not, but I haven't run into any problems with that. Again, if you'd prefer not to have the marker used on your quilt top, the Hera marking tool is a great choice for this. So we have our pillow top ready to go. We've got everything spray basted, and now we're actually ready to get into the quilting part. You guys saw me do my knot a minute ago, but I'm gonna show that to you again since we kind of got distracted there in the center. So I just snipped my knot off. So I'm gonna show you how to do that quilter's knot one more time. I'm right-handed. I have my needle in my right hand. I'm gonna point it towards my left hand. And then I'm taking my thread, laying it right on top here. And I'm going about 2 or 3 times away from myself, just twisting it around that needle, grabbing it with my left hand, and we're pulling it down, crossing our fingers that we're gonna have a knot. And sure enough, that's called a quilter's knot, and that's how I like to start when I'm hand quilting. So what I like to do when I begin is just to start with my knot out here in the batting section. This is gonna get covered up with your binding anyways, so it's a really nice starting point. And I'll just bring it up from the back. And then the stitch that we're doing is called a rocking stitch, and you're going to be loading a few different stitches onto your needle at once. And this is what helps keep your stitches tidy. If you've ever wondered, how do I make straight stitches? When you're trying to hand quilt and do just one stitch at a time, your stitches aren't going to be as straight as they are when we load several onto our needle. So what you'll do is you come down, and I want to stop here for just a second, and you'll notice I'm not using a thimble. And when I am doing small projects, I tend not to use a thimble, but I always encourage whoever I'm teaching to use a thimble if you can, because it's going to allow you to quilt for longer periods of time. One thing to think about is that different people use thimbles on different hands. So on a project like this, I would just start over here in the corner, and I tend to have about 1/4 inch stitches with about a 1/4 inch space. And this is going to vary from person to person. Some people prefer smaller stitches. Some people like to have their stitches tighter together. There's no right or wrong way to hand quilt, in my opinion. Quilting is just attaching 3 layers together, and if we're getting them all attached together, I think we're good to go. So let's begin. I'm going to load about 2 stitches on. I come down straight through. I am hitting, let's see if you can see this, hitting the needle with my middle finger back here when I go down below. And as soon as I feel it hit my middle finger back there, I pivot it right back up and come up. And whatever needle you see sticking out the tip, that's how wide your stitch is going to be. So you can see right now I have a smaller space without thread, and I'm going to have a larger space. And you can adjust this however you want to get the stitches that you like to have. So I'll pivot down, touch my middle finger, and pivot back up, staying on those marked lines. And I tend to use my thumbnail here to push through. That's where you would be using your thimble if you would have a thimble on. You'd be using your thimble to push that through. And you can see what your stitches are going to look like. If you're not happy with them, now's a great time to tug those back out and start over. Another really great way to practice hand quilting is not to put the knot in at the end. And then you can just hand quilt and then pull it all out and hand quilt again, and it's a great way to practice. I know that was something that my mom had my sisters and I do as we were growing up. We just wouldn't knot the end of the thread, and we'd sit at the table with the adults and we would hand quilt with them, stitch as much as we wanted. And you know, we were little, 4, 5, 6 years old, hand quilting with our aunts and grandmas, and that's what we would do sometimes just to practice. So that's a great way to practice. Once you're comfortable again, and really the other thing to remember too is we're looking at these things up super close, and once you have it on a bed or a pillow on your couch, you're not going to notice if your stitches go a little bit crookedy. So, you know, don't sweat it. It should be fun, and if it's not fun, you might want to try something that makes it a little bit more fun. So I'm going to do the same thing, and this is the technique here. We're just rocking our stitches, pushing through, and you just keep going. And I'm a little crookedy there. If I was at home, I might take those out. I'm usually sitting when I hand quilt, so it makes it a little bit less even maybe when I'm standing. I have Netflix on, or what else do I watch? YouTube. I like watching YouTube too when I hand quilt. I find something good and I settle in. These are great projects to have in the winter. Now you'll see I'm coming up here to this intersection. These can sometimes be a little bit of a booger to get through. Your seam allowances are sometimes doubled up, so you sometimes have to work a little bit harder, and sometimes I will just load just 1 stitch on right here just so that I can come up without having to work too hard to get that through. And I don't worry too much about this space here. You're not going to notice that space as much as you notice these other spaces here. The other thing is I'm not exactly worrying about where it falls along my other line here. I'm just going down this line, letting it go as it wants to. And you'll just continue doing this the whole way down through. Hand quilting isn't super speedy. This kind of stitching is faster than if you're more familiar with the tinier stitches. That was one of the reasons I really have taken a liking to this kind of hand quilting with the bigger stitches and the colorful thread. Like you can see, I like that you can see all of the threads. I feel like if you put a lot of work into the project, you want to be able to see it. And it's faster than doing a lot of teeny stitches. So you are just gonna cruise right along. I'm also gonna talk a little bit here about what to do if we get into the middle of our project and we have run out of thread, or we want to start a new strand of thread, because that happens. The nice thing about a small project, I'll usually just measure out across the whole width the length of thread that I need, so I don't ever have to stop and start in the middle of a project. But if you are working on a bigger project, you are going to find that you do need to stop and start in the middle of a project. So I'm going to show you what to do. Let's say we want to stop here. First of all, the thing to do is never to like think that you're going to be able to eke out the last of the row, because you're not going to be able to, and you're going to end up with like a stumpy little piece of thread that's just never going to work to finish off. So give yourself plenty of thread to end on. Let's say right here, we're almost out of thread. You know, give yourself a nice, I don't know, 6 inches or so. We're almost out of thread, so we're gonna stop here. Now this is the way my mom taught me to do this. I've seen different people do this different ways. I'm gonna show you the way that I finish off. So you want to finish off your thread when your stitch is ended, like when you have a complete stitch. So you will come back over top exactly on that last stitch, and this just locks that stitch into place. We are going to end up with a knot in between our batting and our backing, so you want to make sure that you're securing that last stitch into place. So you come up from behind right where you have ended, or right where you started that last stitch, and then you're going to come through right here. Now you can see I'm coming through right at the end of that stitch, but I'm not going down back through the end of my fabric. I'm just right in the batting there. And then if you kind of wiggle your needle around in there, you're gonna get your thread in between the batting and the backing. And you're gonna come up maybe a 1/2 inch or so, and then you're basically just doing a French knot on the top of the project. If you're a cross stitcher, you've probably done a few of these. Sometimes quilters aren't as familiar with them, but it's basically just a little knot on top of your project. You'll take your needle and you will wrap it away from yourself. With a 12 weight thread, you might do this 3 times. If you're doing a heavier weight thread, you're gonna wanna do this maybe just twice, just so that your knot doesn't get so big. And then you just hold that tight against your quilt top, and you're just gonna pull that through, keeping that knot against and keeping your thumb here right on top of that. I made that look much more awkward than it's actually going to be for you. So then once you have your knot, you can see here, I have a little knot right on top of my project. Now we need to just tug that knot down to the back. So the first thing that you can do is snip your thread here, just kind of close to the knot, not too close that your knot's gonna come undone. We wanna just pop that back underneath so we don't see that on the top of our project. Now one little thing I will tell you, and sometimes I do this if I don't wanna stop and start in a pillow project, you're not really gonna see the back of your pillow top once it's in pillow form. So if you feel like leaving your knots on the back, in my book, that's a-okay. But there are gonna be times when you're making a quilt or something where we're going to see the back and you don't want those knots to show. So this is why we're showing you how to do this. So you've got your little knot here, and what we're gonna do here is just catch the thread where it's running in between, and you just tug back behind, and your thread just goes right down underneath there. And now it's just lodged in between your pillow backing and your batting, and it's just gonna stay there. We've gone over that last stitch twice, which secured that last stitch, and now we have a little knot in there so that your stitches aren't going to come back out. So we've completed our row here, but now you need to start a new color. So I'm just gonna show you. What I would do here is I would grab a longer piece of thread so that you know you're gonna continue the whole way down across. You'll make your little quilter's knot, just like I showed you earlier. So you have your needle pointing, I'm right-handed, needle in my right hand, pointed at my left hand. Go around maybe 3 times. Cross our fingers that we get a knot. We've got a knot. And then what you'll do is you're going to, you can start from the top, come through. I'm gonna run my needle just in between. I'm not through the backing at all. I'm just underneath the top here. And with a lighter fabric like this, you're gonna wanna make sure that you're catching it under the batting. So if you wiggle your needle as you go over, you will cause your thread to go underneath that batting, so you're not gonna have any shadowing from your thread. You'll come up right where you want your stitch to come up, and then you're just gonna tug him over, and the knot is in there. And then usually, if I've left too long of a tail, which there's always gonna be too long of a tail, just pull it out till the knot catches, and then you can just trim that, not all the way down, but just trim that off, and then when you tug it over, it's no longer showing from the top, and then you're ready to continue going. And you'll just keep on going, and you just repeat that a a few more times, and then you finish your pillow top. This isn't something that you're going to expect to finish in just a couple hours. It's going to take a little bit of time, but it's very relaxing just to sit and enjoy and take your time doing something that you're going to end up with that you'll be able to treasure for a while. Here I have my completed hand quilted pillow top. You'll see that you can see those blue marked lines on there. Now those are going to come off once your pillow is completely done. We just leave them on at this point in time, at least I do, just so that I have binding on when I choose to take those markers off. I just leave it just like this. And I wanted to show you the front and then also the back, because people always ask, what does the back look like? This is what my back looks like. You'll see the little knots all around the outside edge here. Those are going to get stuck in your binding. If you happen to catch any of those when you are trimming up your pillow top, that's okay if we lose them, because we're gonna have that binding that's gonna come in 1/4 inch and secure all of our threads around this perimeter in place. So usually I just kind of give them a smooth and hope that they're kind of going the right direction before I trim them. But I also wanted to point out that my stitches on the back do not look the same as they do on the front. And that's what you're going to find with your hand quilting, is it's never going to look the same as it does on the back as it does on the front. And then just to keep in mind that your hand quilting is going to look different from mine, in that sometimes your stitches, some people's stitches are longer, some are shorter, the spacing between is going to be a little bit different. It's kind of like handwriting. Everyone's hand quilting is as different as everybody's hand writing. So you just quilt how you like it, how you like the look, and have fun, and that's the goal. So the next thing that we're going to do here is we're going to trim up our quilt top. You'll just use a ruler that reaches down across your whole pillow top, and we're just going to trim up everything nice and even, much like you would trim a quilt top or another pillow top that's been machine quilted. And once we have this all trimmed up, we're going to be ready to add our pillow back and bind it, and then we'll have a completed project. Pillows are a great way to try out hand quilting. Sometimes hand quilting feels a little bit intimidating, but with a pillow you're not locked into anything really long term. Pillows and minis are probably some of my favorite projects to do hand quilting on, or little bags, or project bags, just because it allows you to try out something, but you're not going to be overwhelmed by a much larger project. So we've got our trimmed up pillow top, and we're ready to add the backing. So what I have here, the pillow top of course, and then you are going to need 2 rectangles. I have these cut at 12.5 by 18, and I like to do an envelope enclosure for the back of my pillows. So what you would do is you would just fold both of your rectangles, your backing rectangles, in half, and give this a nice press, and then I like to top stitch across this the folded side. This is the side that's going to be seen on your pillow when it's in use, of course, on the back. So I do like to just top stitch that, and that's going to give you a nice edge here with just the nice finished top stitching there. I kind of eyeball how far away from the fold I go. This is about 1/4 inch. Sometimes I might do 1/8 of an inch, or just line it up where it falls nicely on my sewing machine foot, just so it looks nice. And then once you have both of your pieces top stitched, then you are ready to clip this all together. So you're going to put your pillow top down, and these are going to overlap on the back of your pillow. Now I have these cut at 12.5 across, and what you're going to notice when you lay these out is most likely your pillow top will have shrunk down just a bit from the hand quilting. And you've probably noticed that before. If you machine quilt something, it tends to shrink up a little bit as you're working. So what I'll do is I will line up everything on 3 sides. So I have this raw edge, this raw edge, and this raw edge all lined up, and then I'm gonna flip this over, and you're going to see that I have some overhang here first. But first what I like to do is clip, and I like to use Wonder Clips just to clip everything in place before I flip it over. And actually this larger size of Wonder Clips is the size I almost always use. I just like the stability they give to a project. So I grab some of these, and clip all the way around. We're going to be basting this into place. So right now these are mostly just holding everything in place so that you can trim it all up nicely. You'll just continue around the perimeter here. The one thing I didn't do that I should have done is we're going to be trimming this side, so you don't want this guy back here to be as close to the edge. So I'm going to move him back over a little bit so that I have room to trim on that side. And we're going to flip over and you're going to see what I'm talking about. So here we go. This is what we're working with right here, and we just need to trim that off. I'm even going to back that off a little bit more here. Maybe I'm just going to take those off altogether so that I have room for my ruler. And you might have a narrower ruler that you're using. Really, you've got it pinned down on this side and it's not moving around, so everything is staying where you want it to. And then we're just going to trim that off even there. And then you can pin these back on here. I usually leave those on a little bit here until I'm done with my machine basting, and then at that point in time you're not going to need them anymore. So you're going to just pin this back on. You'll take this over to the machine and you're going to, I usually do this from the back. You're just going to run maybe 1/8 of an inch in from the edge, just a basting stitch. I just turn my knob up as far as it goes and just hammer on around the pillow top and just to secure the backing in. The stitch doesn't have to look tidy as you're doing this. You probably don't want to hammer too fast. I may have said that a little bit aggressively because you don't want everything shifting around on you as you're going, but just go around the perimeter, get everything in place about 1/8 of an inch in. That's all going to get covered up with your binding, and then we're going to be ready to attach binding, and I am going to show you how to do that in just a bit, so stick around.